Hvala lepa. Dame in gospodje, ladies and gentlemen, lahko izrazim eno veliko veselje in spoštovanje, da
Allow me to express my deep gratitude and admiration to be able to speak to you on behalf of the Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Infrastructure and Spatial Planning. I'm very pleased to see so many participants here and such high-ranking experts being present. I took advantage of this break to speak personally with the participants, and it was clear that the morning session was a very interesting one. It was a highlight of today, so we have this difficult task ahead of us to keep up with the reputation of the first part. I was invited to say a few words about the current position of the Slovenian energy policy. Where are we heading to? And we can even say in jest that it will be very good if we manage to leave the home harbor in the first place. We are finding ourselves now on the crossroads. When the new team was formed at the ministry a few months ago, we were facing certain issues and challenges, and unfortunately we also realized that we don't have much choice. It would be good to first start with the base, continue with the walls, and finish with the chimney, just as in any construction. But before we manage to form a vector that will send a clear message to the home and foreign players, we need to do our homework. And the energy sector has found itself in the situation, but the homework hasn't been done, and that is that we need to transpose 11 directives and 6 regulations into our legal order. We decided to draft a very comprehensive legislative act. It is a very important act in terms of contents and in terms of weight. Energy sector has always contributed one of the highest added value in the country, and for this we need clear messages, clear signals, and a very comprehensive legislative network. I'm very pleased to express my joy at the fact that next week the act will be sent to government for approval, and that is the beginning of the legislative process. So the draft will be sent to the government. And I believe that even though the draft has been discussed within the narrow professional circle, the genie is now left out from the bottle or from the lamp, and it will now become a topic of general discussion. I've heard this also as a comment that anyone who has 5 minutes of time speaks about energy policy. In the drafting of the act, we have stated several priorities, one of them, or the first one, being competitiveness. We have found out that the previous drafts, including the first one, competitiveness, has been lagging behind. In times of conjunction, when economy is growing, competitiveness is not that important. It can be overlooked, but we are no longer in that situation. Quite on the contrary, competitiveness needs to be reflected in every approach, every attempt, and a legislative act needs to be a proof of that. And then competitiveness needs to be translated into secondary legislation, and so on and so forth. All this will hopefully result in the energy concept of Slovenia. The previous draft, or rather the previous national energy program, was too obsolete, it was too comprehensive, and a number of other criticisms were voiced on its account. We wanted to put the name Slovenia into the title. We wanted it to become ours. A number of tasks are laying ahead of us, perhaps even worse tasks than drafting the Energy Act, but we are not afraid of them because we know what the price will be at the end. It will be a price for the whole of the energy sector and for the whole of Slovenian state, and we shouldn't forget about the final user, because the final users are the ones who pay for energy and pay for our services. And we must not forget about industry, because industry needs competitive energy policy today. This is the fil rouge of the draft act, which will also be reflected in the energy concept for Slovenia. Of course, we will not neglect equality, non-discriminatory principle, and the principle of common sense. Certain anomalies need to be resolved. It will be difficult, but this is not a problem, it is a challenge. That's how we must look at it. Energy sufficiency must not be endangered. The energy concept has been well conceived, but we did not invest enough funds into it, so we must really keep focusing on that. Up until 2020, we will alternatively speak about renewables, about new energy sources. It is a story that we initiated and it will not end in 2020. Perhaps in the past we didn't focus that much on the energy efficiency. This topic will have to be pushed forward, its priority is increased, and these are two of our most important targets for 2020, as well as carbon-less society. And slowly we will have to develop steps that will bring us there. Lying ahead of us are 2030 targets. We can smell them, so to speak. And the energy concept for Slovenia will have to tackle an even longer cycle up until 2050 or even more, at least when it comes to analysis and possible scenarios. I keep repeating that civil administration, that is public service in Slovenia, has more than 50 directorates. And 2 of the 2020 goals fall under the scope of the Energy Directorate, whereas the 3rd one falls under the scope of the Environmental Directorate. And the 3rd goal will be tackled if the first 2 will be fulfilled. So, if Slovenia as a state assumed these commitments, it should also devote human and financial resources for the fulfillment of these goals. Because if you adopt a very ambitious goal, then this decision needs to be backed with sufficient resources in order to come to life. In the opposite case, we may have to face some very tough situations. Here it says that we have 4% of reserves when it comes to CO2 emissions. This means that there is room for maneuver. Slovenia can develop, and we count on that reserve. But we must create an energy environment that will be acceptable for the industry and for the final consumer at the end. I would like to mention 3 areas which are part of the energy policy. So, energy efficiency, savings, 25% for renewables, and for CO2 emissions. This slide shows that it will be the energy sector that will have to contribute its major share towards the fulfillment of the goal. We will have to go from 5% to 36% in terms of CO2 emissions reductions. The fact that we have such an ambitious goal is not bad in itself, because we can find many business opportunities here. The transport sector obtained a very good outcome. They have set themselves a good target, 10%. It was very feasible, and they said, well, the rest will have to be achieved by the energy sector. So we have come from slightly more than 20 to 40%. It is a battle that awaits us, and we will have to conduct this battle in the field of environment as well. So we will have to be very successful when it comes to the positioning of solar plants in the environment. But we're not afraid of that. If we have a strong sector, then we can be successful. What will happen after 2020? After 2020, we will strive to align the targets with what Slovenian society and Slovenian industry can handle. These 2 vectors have not been aligned in the past, and that is why we are facing a huge problem, which is called a huge gap when it comes to renewables energy sources. This gap must be filled in, so we have to realign these 2 targets, and we will try to channel this into subsidies, and we will try to find competitive investors. This is a short summary of the goals until 2020, but I've mentioned this before. You can see that we have several reserves in biomass and hydro energy, to say nothing about renewables. 3 years ago, the photovoltaic panels, or their number rather, was neglectable. Today, we generate almost 300 gigawatt hours per year by solar panels. And this is a strategy that we need to take into account until 2020, because if we deviate from this by 10%, then we will not be able to reach our goals, considering, of course, the growth of usage as well. So we can no longer speak about neglectable quantities. The commitments have been undertaken, and for photovoltaic plants alone, a Slovenian household pays €2 per month on the average. And this amount will not go down. I think we can all say, yes, the renewables are where the future is, but when we will receive the invoices, the bills, I'm no longer sure that the consent will be so unanimous. And I'm very pleased to see amongst the audience directors of certain companies, because such an approach leads these companies in a very uncompetitive position. So we don't want the story from the past to repeat itself. 1/3 of energy will still be generated by the largest hydro power plants. And again, we are facing difficulties in locating new facilities in the lower Sava riverbed, in the upper Sava riverbed. So we'll have to really speak very clearly about what we want as a state. The economic model of 10 power plants in the middle Sava riverbed, or 5 or 7, this is a completely different story, and I do not want to adhere to certain insinuations saying, well, be lucky because you will get 5. This isn't correct. We need 10 power plants, hydropower plants, and this is the only element that is aligned with the competitiveness vector. Here you can see the import of energy, our dependency that is still growing. We have amounted to 7% of gross domestic product. Renewables are the future, but they are also an opportunity. We just need to be smart enough and create a sound basis for further development of this story. We should not give advantage to one stream and make it more favorable than another stream of development. The renewables are very dispersed sources. We have made an assessment that the means for energy use on yearly basis will be 500 million euros. This brings along a new economic cycle, new employments, new absorption of domestic knowledge, and last but not least, this will reduce our dependency on foreign sources. We will be creating our own energy policy, and of course this will amount to a higher GDP. What else to say? Energy as a public service needs to support all the players on the market, be it the market with electricity or with the gas, but it must also serve as a support for other institutions. This is where I see the ministry's role, and I see that this role is being assumed by other directorates as well. I am pleased to see the Director General of the Energy Directorate here. He is a person with a very high number of, or a very high amount of international experience, and we share our thoughts frequently. That is to say, we agree on a number of issues. So, how can energy policy contribute towards our future development? I think we can achieve a consensus with the Energy Industry Chamber of Slovenia and other stakeholders. But the consent will not be reached easily. Harmonization will be a difficult process, but we will have to tackle this issue. And before we do that, the better for everyone. I have listed here a few parameters, but I will not go into detail. Thank you so much on my behalf. Thank you for inviting me, and I wish you a very successful afternoon session, and I hope that the afternoon session will contribute its share, will give a weight to this conference, and I hope that we will be pleased with the outcome of this session. Thank you.